What is your title and responsibilities for UConn Abroad?
My name is Laura Hills. I'm the Associate Director of Education Abroad. So I am pretty much in charge of all the student support services. So not an official title by any means, but you can kind of look at me as a director of advising. So working very closely with our students who are preparing to go abroad, who are just prospective and thinking about it, the marketing and outreach, in addition to kind of throughout the entire process and their return as well. So working with the student ambassadors, the reentry process, so kind of a little bit of everything when it comes to the student kind of aspects of the education abroad experience. So any events too that go on are kind of through my purview. So in relation to kind of what I do with the students, what just happened is that I was in extremely close contact with them. So from when everything started, it was working with our administration. So a lot of people kind of, I think part of your question is, how did this start, and what were our overall kind of reaction plans to it? I don't think anyone, unfortunately, in this world was prepared for what is going on right now. This is pretty crazy. We began working with students that were going abroad to China or were already in China this past January. So COVID-19 was not new to us when the U.S. started kind of going nuts about it. So we had students that were in China or planning to go, so we had them removed, or not removed, but we highly advised them to return home. Those programs were canceled, followed by monitoring the situation across the world, and then ending ultimately with all 306 students returning home.
Gotcha. So, what's the specific threshold to make that decision? What exactly goes into the decision to bringing them home? Because I know they didn't all come home at the same time. So
yeah. So it was when the CDC escalated their ranking or their level to a 3 or higher. So basically kind of restricting travel, or our biggest worry was not, by no means did we want to pull anyone out of anywhere. It was as disappointing to us as it was for the students or the parents that this affected. So China had been raised. So China had been by our administration. It was a decision of our administration in the state. It was not like me saying, "Oh, everybody has to come home," which some people thought it was. And then from there, our students in Italy, we had 80 students throughout 3 different programs in Italy. And then they came home once that rose the level to the CDC. And then ultimately when President Trump put into effect, I believe it was a Wednesday, that following day is when we advised everyone to return home or to a safe location. So some students at first did decide to go with parents or family members that were around Europe or other areas of the world. So they felt safe there, but ultimately they returned because some students were kind of stuck for a little bit because they closed borders, or they were talking about closing borders or flights and things like that. So we were very well aware of where everybody was. So we had an entire tracking sheet. We were touching base with every student that came home to confirm that they were on U.S. soil or in the safe community that they wanted to be in.
How difficult is it to tell these kids that they have to come home?
It's probably been with this office for 7.5 years, and it was probably the hardest thing I've had to do in this office. In my role. And it was all of us. So director, Matt Yates, myself, both have been in international education for quite some time. We're a part of Global Affairs, which Global Affairs there's a reason why you are in the role you are within our unit in the university. You have a passion for what you do, and truly I was telling students, it's hard to say I understand what you're feeling, because I don't exactly, but I do, because I feel like I was on a piece of every student's program, because I love to hear how they come back, or when they starting the process when they're a freshman and they come up to you at the fair and they're just like, I've always wanted to go to XYZ because I want to be a chemical engineer, and they have the best research lab there is in Australia. And then they finally get to that semester, and unfortunately it's abruptly pulled from them. Some students didn't even start the semester. But it was probably one of the hardest things I've had to do. Talking with parents after the fact, during, trying to get students home, students that may have had difficulty financially getting home, that were not budgeting for a flight that all of a sudden skyrocketed. So being able to really work with all our resources at the university to help the students. So we pretty much were in touch with everyone. But then obviously the pandemic started to creep into the U.S. and we were also working with the students on our campus that had to go home. So we have a huge international population, and education abroad has incoming exchange students. So we had about 50 on campus that some are still here in the U.S., but most of them did depart to go to their home countries. And then we obviously have our international population just as a whole at UConn that's here, and they're through our ISSS office, which falls under Global Affairs as well. So we're on a lot of conference calls, to say the least.
Is there any word on what's happening for UConn abroad in the summer and the fall and the next spring? Do you know anything on that yet?
Yeah, so summer was canceled. That was pretty much a trend across the U.S. And abroad. A lot of our programs abroad were canceling as well, so not allowing our students to come to them. And then when it comes to our fall programming and students who have applied for academic year, they have currently until April 30th to commit to the program, but right now we are going ahead with fall. But that really could change any day. We know how this world's working right now, but we have prepared the students to either be abroad or return home, to stay home, and what that would look like for their fall semester. And in addition to that, talking about plan A, B, and C. So maybe they go abroad in the spring 2021. We haven't really we are thinking past spring 2021, and what that looks like, but also starting to think about creativity. I think the entire abroad nation is thinking what that's going to look like. Is it going to be more remote, kind of, I guess, overall experiences? Are there going to be remote internships with a global company, and kind of giving the student the footprint virtually? So I think that it's also creative about being local as well, and how can you integrate diversity and accessibility, and just kind of what is going on around the world, not only with the pandemic, but when this is over, how you can have an educational international experience at home too. So I think that's what's on our plan, figuring out strategically.
Do you have any regrets or anything you would change if you could do this all again? Because I know it all happened very fast and you're reacting on the spot. So I was just wondering if there was anything you'd change.
I think we were extremely proactive when it came to getting word out and to being there for the students and supportive. One of the think is extremely important was communication directly with the students. Obviously, we had a lot of parents calling us and family members. And we couldn't, I think we were extremely on top of things when, especially being a state university, working with the state, and we kind of get calls from the governor. So we had to wait for the governor to ultimately tell us things or make a decision before we could do things on our end. Same with the administration. Like for refunds, for example, a lot of students were on our case about that. And unfortunately, we had to wait for the Board of Trustees because we just couldn't, as a university, just hand out money because that's not where our position was. We had parents calling us and saying, well, just take it from, we know how much the basketball coaches make, take it from them, their salary. I'm like, it's not that easy. But I think my team overall did an amazing job of connecting with the students. I think initially some of the students in Italy may have felt like we pulled the plug too early on them. And then I don't think, so at that time, they were very upset and angry, which I can completely understand. Some of these students have been waiting forever for this and invested a lot of money and time and energy and creating their academic plans around it. So I wish I could have connected closer with that population. So I think that I wish they had understood more about what it was like, what our reasoning was for them to return. Because I think that they thought that, like I said, we were just like kind of pulling a puppy from them. And it was like, wait, why are you doing this? I think now if you ask them, they would understand a little bit better what happened and why. That they were thinking a lot about themselves, which I think we all needed to understand. But then when it became a global issue, it kind of set in a little bit more that helped them understand why we were protecting them and keeping them healthy and safe. Because we didn't know, a big thing too is we didn't know when they were going to close the border and say nobody's coming in or out.
Yeah.
What do we do for the students? That was my concern ultimately. And as a parent, that would be, I told parents all the time, like, that would be the scariest thing, is not having my child be able to leave and be able to help them.